what are three fundamental steps that need to happen for us to have an overwhelming change, an overhaul of our current drug policy?
Yeah,
It doesn't
definitely.
have to be three, it could be your top two.
Yeah, okay. So I think first and foremost, um, the decriminalization of all drugs is 100% completely necessary. All that. So what's that saying? What that's saying is that we're going to treat drugs as a public health issue, and the
Mm,
people who use drugs in a problematic way, where it's affecting other areas. Because we mentioned earlier that 97% of drug use is non-problematic.
yeah.
So it'd be the same as someone drinking or smoking to normal levels. And so what decriminalization is saying is that for the 3% who have problematic drug use, we're then going to be able to, instead of send them to prison and give them a criminal record and completely destroy their chances of regaining stability once they come out, we're going to remove all of that, and we're just going to offer public health services, and we're going to offer them help. So that is the number one thing. I think that will also go to massively help in terms of racial disparities in prisons and kind of all this money that is lost in the criminal justice system that could be saved for non-violent drug offences. So okay, so that's the first one. The second is the regulation of drugs as well. I mean, if you look at Portugal, they've decriminalized drugs, but they haven't regulated drugs, and so you still have people going to the black market who are getting drugs and they don't know what it is. And what you do with regulation is you say that for people who have problematic drug use, they can then go to their pharmacist or their GP. They can get access to these drugs and can then work with a GP, having safe amounts of these drugs where they aren't going to overdose and die. And then they can work with a healthcare practitioner to reduce that intake over time. And I mean, there's different models of regulation. There's an organization called Transform Drug Policy, who are based in Bristol, and they've actually written guides on how to regulate cannabis, how to regulate stimulants, and then they recently came out with a kind of a bigger volume which looks at how to just have a regulated drug market, and they consult with governments all over the world who are looking to implement these policies. So I'm not an expert on regulation whatsoever, but there are blueprints for doing these things, which would kind of completely mitigate the chance of overdosing and dying, because all these overdoses are linked to potency and not knowing how strong the drugs are. And it also would just take all this power and money away from criminal gangs. I mean, that's something that I haven't touched on at all today, but if you
Yeah.
trace back kind of from the consumer down to the production of drugs, the majority of the violence that's caused from the drug trade is in producing countries and countries through which the drug trade moves through. And so, I mean, that it's another kind of moral and ethical conundrum for Western governments who have all this data around kind of murder rates and kind of the damage at the societal level that's being caused in kind of Southern American countries and African countries because of the drug trade. And so by regulating drugs, you're taking this money and this power and this violence away from the black market, and you're just making it safer for everyone involved. So decriminalization, regulation, and then huge investments into non-judgmental, non-coercive drug treatment for people who need it. So not forcing people into drug treatment, but having it there available for people who need it and who are ready to go into drug services. So yeah, those would be the three things: decriminalization, regulation, and investment in drug treatment services.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great summary. It's a great way to end it, Ben. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming on today. You're clearly very well versed in this area of harm reduction and challenging the status quo. And I have big respect for you because you're going against the grain. I think, unfortunately, most of society doesn't think the same way as you think when it comes to drug policy. And I hope in a couple of decades, we'll come around to that once all the evidence becomes too overwhelming.
Yeah.
Are there any other links